What's up, y'all? I'm Deeg, here to share with you today my thoughts on New World and its closed beta, which has been running for 2 weeks and is closing today in the next few hours on August 2nd, 2021. We're about 1 month out from the intended full release of this game, and today I'm here to talk with you about my thoughts about the game, what it is today, where it's going, and some of the fun, spicy surrounding context, which of course ends up being just as important, if not more so, than the thing itself. Let's get into it, shall we? New World. What is New World? Well, for those of you who are not in the loop, New World is a brand new MMO from Amazon Game Studios. It was announced in September of 2016 alongside Crucible and Breakaway, which have since been killed mercilessly by Amazon Game Studio. It's a brand new IP set in the age of exploration. It takes place on the archetypal fantasy continent of Eternum, which you can see here, where you take on archetypal fantasy enemies and each other. New World was planned originally to release in spring of 2020, over a year ago. What happened? New World has gone through multiple delays, motivated by multiple redesigns along the way. It may be hard to believe for those of you who have your hands on the game now, or if you're watching this in the future and playing it in retail, but New World was originally conceived and staged as a hardcore PvP full loot MMO. You know those games people troll each other with on Twitch and take each other's stuff and grief each other? That was what New World was. After alpha feedback from alpha testers, New World, under the auspices of Amazon Game Studios, undertook a hard course correction to soften its PvP and flesh out its PvE. And here you can see, boom, May 2020. Best of intentions, am I right? So, but something did happen in 2020. We did actually get a chance to get our hands on, as the public, New World in the state that it was in August of 2020. And I did too. I jumped in. My first exposure to the game. I actually made a video about it back in October last year. In that public test, which we all had access to for 1 week, I was one of many who jumped in to learn what this game actually was. What was the gameplay behind these images, behind these cinematics? Here's what I found when I played it last year in the public test. At that time, I found New World to have chunky, punishing, satisfying, skill shot focused combat. Very fun, very different feeling from other MMOs out there. It seemed at the time to have deep and rewarding gathering and crafting, much more heavily emphasized in other MMOs. Its PvP combat was highly enjoyable in one-on-one fights, duels, or just random world PvP encounters out in the world. Go on and on. There was counterplay, positioning, staggering, all these different deep-feeling verbs to interact with other players that felt like you came away from combat thinking every single time, oh man, I could have done this better. And lastly, it was manifestly obvious how beautiful and compelling the presentation, all the money that went into this title, had paid off to be. The graphics, sound, music, interface, all world-class for MMOs last year in 2020. But I did have some fears that came out of that experience. And let's detail what a few of those were. I mentioned that New World was going through a course correction to soften its PvP and add PvE. Well, When the public test came out, it was on the heels of announcing that the game would be delayed to spring 2021. And after playing the game in the public test, which had very little in terms of PvE, a threadbare questing experience, no dungeons, very few even named foes, it was not clear at all what the game would look like with a fleshed out form of PvE, and less than a year seemed like not anywhere near enough time to achieve those goals. So that was one fear. 1 year is not a lot of time to add compelling PvE. And that while solo combat, like I was highlighting earlier, felt great, group combat didn't. The way that Stagger worked and the way that ranged shot occlusion works, because one of the ways that New World stands out in is that it has actual body blocking. You don't just clip through each other like you do in every other MMO. It made it very hard even just to access combat in a moment-to-moment basis from time to time. If you were trying to fight a boss and it was surrounded by people in melee and you were ranged, you were shooting into their backs. You couldn't even hit the boss, unless it was very tall, of course. At that time, the incentives seemed very poor to participate in the PvP sandbox part of the game. It was a 10% experience bonus to flag for PvP, and the result of that seemed to be that 1 out of 100 people that I ran into during the public test was actually PvP flagged. I actually roamed around for hours in the final days of my public test experience saying, in Prox chat, PvP me, flag up, PvP me. No one wanted to. Too inconvenient. Overall, though, I would say that my biggest underlying fear for New World in 2020 was that rather than emerging as a compelling PvP-PvE hybrid, the New World would emerge as something that would please nobody. That's always the risk when you hybridize, is you risk pleasing no one. And even worse, because of Amazon Game Studios' history with Crucible and Breakaway, the fear was that they would rather kill New World than release it at anything less than a killer state. We're going to compete with World of Warcraft, or we're going to go back to the drawing board and try again. It's kind of the vibe you get. So, closed beta. How did it go? How did those fears and hopes and observations pan out? And here's some footage from me rolling up in the beta. Okay, here are some Cliff's Notes. There are an enormous amount of things that changed about New World from last year to this year. A huge amount of things. But here are some of the things that really stood out to me. Number one, they introduced a brand new interactive quest and dialogue interface alongside high-quality voice acting. If you play the game now for the first time, you might not notice this. It might fade into the background. But in the public test, this was noticeably absent. Having it here is good. And the high-quality voice acting was a very nice surprise. The voice acting isn't applied everywhere. My assumption is that this is a reflection of the fact that the voice work is getting done now, and it will be there for the release of the full game next month. So we'll see if that's the case. They also added an attempt at an overarching quest chain. I know there was something like this back in the public test, but this seems to be more fleshed out now. But more important than an overarching quest chain is they added dungeons, and they don't seem to suck. They meaningfully iterated on all game systems from what I can tell, including combat, which was tweaked to be better for group play. They made it so you can shoot through your allies' backs if you're ranged, and they changed Stagger so that it's harder to stagger lock people. The community, well, parts of the community are split on the Stagger change. What else? So the PvP game that's focused on territorial control is still intact. And it allows for all the glory for your company that it did before. I'm going to get into that more shortly. They also added new endgame instance PvE and PvE experiences that are open to all. Invasions and outpost rushes. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think these are in the test. And they're new for the beta. I could be wrong about that. But they're there and they're available to everybody. Not just people who play the company territory game. All in all, my bottom line impression about the beta is that it's a highly produced MMO from a brand new IP backed by one of the world's richest companies. And it's making a valiant attempt at standing up a world of PvP risk, PvE thrills, and the fun that can only result from combining them. That, to me, is New World at its best. The fun, dynamic interaction of PvP risk and PvE thrills. So, I want to talk for a few minutes about people who don't know too much about New World to explain what some of these PvE, PvP, whatever systems look like, and my experiences with them. And I want to start with talking about the territory system. In order to do that, I'm going to load up a glorious war. Actually, in this case, the war was not so glorious. This is footage from a war where the enemy didn't show up, and we had to hang out waiting for 30 minutes for things to finish. So, not a great example of an enjoyable experience. Let's fast forward a little bit. So, let's go back. Here we go. So, the New World Territory game. The New World Territory game feels to me kind of like the brainstem of a New World. In my head, I'm thinking of it as the soul. In some ways, it is the earliest, oldest part of the game. One of the things that is most directly a remnant of the original hardcore PvP design. Let's step through what it is. You start with a faction. At level 10, you get to pick from one of three factions: Marauders, Covenant, Syndicate. This is not like choosing Horde or Alliance in World of Warcraft, because you can still group up in PvE with people from all three factions. The only thing that the factions do is they align you in PvP. And the company, which is a guild equivalent that you will join, is intrinsically aligned with one of the three factions: Marauder, Covenant, Syndicate. As a company, like kind of guild design in other games, you have a flag that you can design and create yourself. Like I said, you belong to a faction. You can declare wars and hold territory. Companies that hold territory, which is one of the double fistful of zones in the map, at least during the closed beta, there look to be more coming on release. They collect taxes from these territories from all transactions, including crafting, trading, housing. So owning territory is profitable. There is upkeep, but there's profit as well. Governors of those companies can kick off town upgrades and zone-wide buffs. Pretty cool. War can be declared on a hostile territory. I should talk about what a hostile territory actually means first. So, let's say you're a Marauder and you enter Syndicate territory. How does this affect your experience of the zone? Does it prevent you from playing in dungeons, from doing quests? No. Does this stop you from entering town? No. Does it stop you from using town services? No. It has no material effect on the way you play the game outside of your engagement with the territorial open world PvP system. If you turn your PvP flag off, it has literally no impact on your experience of the game, which is a benefit or a detriment, depending on how you look at it. But if you do choose to engage with that system, war can be declared once an enemy faction has filled up a progress bar on a zone by engaging in open world PvP and completing PvP quests. What are PvP quests? Well, they're the answer to the question, how do you declare war on an enemy that doesn't show up? So let's say that you're required to get PvP world kills in order to declare war on a territory. Well, if you're the faction holding the territory just doesn't flag up, then you can't kill anything. So war can never be declared. So PvP quests exist as a mechanism to force the issue. You can go to your enemy's town, talk to your faction leader within their enemy settlement, and they'll send you on PvP quests within the zone. When you complete those PvP quests, you get all the rewards from a quest, plus you'll increase this conflict bar that once it maxes out, will put the zone into a state where for the next 10 minutes, a company from the faction who maxed out the bar can declare war. I think declaring war has a monetary cost associated with it. So it's not like first come, first serve. Within that 10 minutes, you have to have your governor, or I think consuls can do it, the top 2 ranks of the company, online, and you have to have enough gold in the treasury in order to do this. So that puts an organizational barrier behind declaring war, which is probably a good thing. So let's say you declare war successfully. Your company puts up the scratch and you're online when it happens. Great. Maybe you ran the PvP quest in order to do this. Once the war is declared, the game will automatically schedule the war, which is a 50 versus 50 zone control conflict, based on the defending company's siege window. The siege window is set by the governor of the company. And basically, it's telling the game, hey, if someone wants to go to war with us, we want that war to be scheduled at this time of day. And you can set it to be earlier or later. And I imagine that depending on which region of this, which server region you're going to be playing in, people are roughly going to be playing in those regions. And say you're West Coast like I am, they're going to be setting up siege windows that are usually after work hours. I guess you could have a group of people who create and defend territory based on siege windows at obscure hours that no one can show up for. That's kind of an interesting thing I hadn't thought of. But that's the way it works, or seems to. Maybe those times are constrained based on server. I'm not sure. Anyway, so like I said, the war itself, which you see playing out here on screen, is a 50 versus 50 conflict. There are 3 control points between the enemy bases. The attacking team starts off at like a small forward outpost, and the defending team has like a hold that they can defend. The hold, which by the way, can be upgraded if you own the territory. So there's some more meta stuff that feeds into the conflict as well. But the objective, if you're attacking, is to capture A, B, and C. If you capture A, B, and C, you can then move on to assault the fort itself. And if you breach the gates and get inside, there's a single point inside of it that once you hold it, you win. And you get 30 minutes to do this. If you win and successfully attack the territory, then the territory flips to your faction. So if it was held by purple and you're green, it flips green. And your company will assume command of the taxation and of the upkeep of the territory and its settlement. And you'll get to reap taxes. And you, most importantly of all, though, more than the income, more than the bragging rights, is seeing your company's flag fly over the flags on the settlement and over the territory on the map. So that's a feels good, man. So that's roughly what the open world PvP territory game shakes out to be, as far as I can tell so far. I myself have played in 3 wars. I've tried to do more, but, you know, there's only so much time in the day. And here are some loose thoughts about how this system kind of works, and some concerns. Number 1, and maybe the most salient, is that nobody knows right now, and if you played an alpha, maybe you can chirp in and let me know, but it's not at all clear to me if this system is going to be fun to play at the end game. Once the entire server has been filled up, once every single zone is claimed by a company, are people going to want to continue to change and defend territory? Is it going to be worth the hassle? Are people going to want to be playing in wars? Is it going to be... Because it is a lot of hassle. to tip over and declare territory. It takes a lot of organization. You've got to manage to progress an enemy territory by playing PvP, and if the enemy actually decides to fight you and prevent you from progressing the bar, that can be a real hassle, I imagine. One thing I'm noticing about the system in closed beta is that for the most part, no one is engaging in world PvP at all. Which is meaning that anyone who wants to declare war can just loot PvP quests in hostile territory. In my mind, there needs to be a little more legibility of this happening. If I'm playing Marauders, Team Green, and Syndicate, the Purples, show up in my settlement and they start running PvP quests from their faction leader, I should get some kind of a prominent notification this is happening. I should be alerted that, hey, there's like an attempt at taking control of our territory happening. One of the only ways this kind of happens is there's a fort within the territory, which is kind of like a war camp. And if there's conflict at the war camp, at the fort, then I guess there's notifications that go out. But you can do tons and tons of PvP quests and not have any idea that it's happening outside of loading up the map and saying that the bar has been progressed. PlanetSide 2 is a game about territorial conflict, and it has hotspots where conflict is happening. I think New World could really benefit from a system like PlanetSide 2's hotspots, where PvP quest completion and open world PvP is happening. What else? Oh yeah, so the world PvP incentives, like they were in public test, are still pretty damned weak. I mentioned that last year there was a 10% experience buff for flagging. That's been reduced to 5%. Basically, it's a token amount. And if you're killed even once in world PvP, it totally... If you even engage in conflict, that distraction of engaging in conflict, even if you win, makes you less efficient in terms of experience than if you just had not flagged at all. What that functionally does is it leaves world PvP people who are intrinsically motivated and just like the PvP for PvP's sake, which over time will become less and less. Or people who are playing the territory game, which I suspect over time may also be less and less. What that ends up looking like is you having a bunch of kind of old school PvP tryhards that are playing the PvP territory game while everyone else is just playing with their flag turned off. I worry that's going to happen. What else do I have here for notes? Yeah, okay. So because of this reality, and because the territory PvP game is a social system where players can change the world, there has to be a lot of friction in the game that prevents this from happening easily and trivially and by a small number of people. And there's definitely a lot of that in this system and the way it's set up. But that very friction that makes it difficult to flip territory will make people averse from engaging with it at all. And because territorial control, at least as far as I can tell, is less about making money and it's more about bragging rights, it's only going to attract the intrinsically PvP motivated over time. And everyone else, who are the traditional MMO crowd of chasing rewards, chasing outcomes, rather than chasing intrinsic interest, are going to ignore this system. And with that, Amazon will ignore this system. Here's what I wrote. I really worry that Amazon Game Studio will be massively incentivized to dilute the finite territory game over time in favor of content that everyone can and will play. That the very inaccessibility that's required in order to prevent this system from being cheesed and manipulated by a small number of people will prevent its long-term success. And why am I worried about this? I actually like this system. I gotta tell you, if New World did not have this territorial control system, I would probably let it pass me by. Because the rest of what's here is not interesting enough, is not new enough. is not exceptional enough for me to spend my time and my interest on. The territorial game and the open world PvP experience of New World must be fleshed out. I think about World of Warcraft, right? A game whose identity has completely transformed over time, to the point where there's two versions of the game, old and new, that stand completely apart, have completely different audiences, and reward completely different kinds of players and behaviors. I could see that same thing happening to New World. And I hope it doesn't. Because again, this PvP territorial control system is one of the things about it that is most unique feeling for everything else that it does. And it also, just on a philosophical level, does a better job of emulating the meaning common to similar type games that are played not just in the sphere of video games, but also in the sphere of the real world. Cooperation, competition, coordination, scheduling, planning, tactics, taxation, and the things that you will remember when it comes to playing a game is you'll never remember an incredible cutscene. You'll never remember an incredibly well-statted piece of loot. You'll never remember a boss that you killed 500 times. What you will remember are the people and personalities that you fought with and against in systems like these. So, hopefully, the way that Amazon Game Studios has segregated the territory of the game isn't to set it to the side to wither and die, but rather to give it its own place that can be fleshed out and grown. But I worry. I had a lot more to say about that than I thought I did. All right, what else? Next, we have the heart of New World: gathering, crafting, and gear. Here I have less to say, but it's worth mentioning. New World's crafting system is the central axis of pretty much everything that happens in terms of items within the game. Everything feeds into it, and it feeds into everything else. Professions that everyone gets, you don't only get to get 2 or 3, you get all of them, are linked to gathering each resource type, refining each resource type, and making stuff out of each of those refined resource types. You start at level 1, and you can progress up to level 200, and as you go up, you automatically unlock higher level recipes and crafting things. There's also some way to get recipes out in the world. I'm not sure how important that is. While I was playing during the beta, I unlocked a handful of cooking recipes, but nothing for anything else. So maybe there's other stuff there. I don't know. Okay, so when you actually go to make something, like say you're making a piece of armor or a sword, if you make a sword, it's going to get a bunch of random attributes assigned to it. So it's going to get a random gear score. And that gear score is something you can influence up higher by using higher quality materials. It's also going to get random perks, but you can coalesce the perks into one that you plan by supplying a mark. And marks seem to be things that are dropped in the world. There might be other ways of getting these. I'm not sure. Like, for example, Mark of the Soldier, I think is what it's called, will make sure that your item, if it's an armor piece, has strength and constitution on it. Or maybe soldier is just strength. Maybe knight is strength and constitution. That sounds right. Anyway. Whenever you make a piece of armor, or a weapon, or something like it, you can add a special currency called Azoth in order to increase the probability of perks proccing on the gear. I don't know the full ramification of this system, but it's one worth keeping a close eye on. Everything in the world breaks down into or directly drops resources that feed into the crafting system. You can craft stuff you need from the very start. In fact, one of the first things the game has you do, which you're seeing here on screen, is to say, go gather some bushes and some flint and craft a skinning knife so that you can skin a boar so that you can make a tent. That's kind of the idea. Additionally, one of the main sources of quests in the game, town boards. So one of the things that governors get to do is they get to kick off projects for the settlements that their company owns. And depending on which projects are selected, that'll define a category of randomly generated quests that anyone can do within the town. And when those things are completed, it will progress the town project. When the town project's been completed by enough players doing random quests, then an upgrade is unlocked. And in order to maintain that upgrade, I think upkeep of some kind has to be done by the owning company and faction. So, those town board quests reward a lot of fucking experience in the closed beta. It's one of the best ways to level up. You get experience from gathering. You get experience from crafting. You get experience for turning in crafted items at the town board. It's a really good, it's the best way to level up right now. Who knows if it'll stay that way, but it's really interesting that you can level entirely from gathering and crafting. So some thoughts on this system. With relatively few exceptions, faction gear and dungeon drops, notably, it looks like the crafting system is the answer to most gear questions in the game. Because of the trading posts that are unique to each settlement and player trading, actually, this amazing system ends up being totally optional. It feels really open. It's fantastic this is optional because it means people get the chance to opt into this system. If you love algebra and spreadsheets, you will have a special role in New World that will make you valued over people who don't like that stuff. Gathering itself feels great. Not much to say here. The whole user interface experience with New World is really, really good in general. Here's a fear, though, for the gathering and crafting system, and it's something I've seen happen in other games. As New World ages, and it tries to hook new players, not into past content, but into current content, which all MMOs do. Amazon Game Studios will have to fight the temptation to put new gear and rewards outside the crafting system. Why would they do this? Because asking someone who's starting the game for the first time 2 years down the road and they want them to play current content and saying, oh, you have to level up through the old crafting system first, they're going to be tempted to say, old crafting system is for old content, which would kind of defy the promise of the system that's there. So they're going to have to fight that temptation. Otherwise, everything I'm saying here about crafting and gathering is going to be diluted. So we'll see if what we see here is actually a print, a template for what is to come, or if it's just what we'll have for the 1 to 60 game. Okay. What else? There are already good arguments that due to faction gear and item drops, there's no reason to worry about crafting gear during level up. Sort of true. To me, if gathering feels like something that crafting feels like something that I do in order to free up storage space and for fun. Reskinning gear is free, but skins only come from store items, not regular gear. So unlike many other games like World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2, if you get a cool looking hat and you get a cool looking helmet, you can't make the helmet look like a hat, the hat you got. The only thing you can make your helmet look like is stuff you've bought on the store. There's no transactional cost for applying a look other than buying the original look on the store. So if you want to get a coordinated look, basically you're using store looks, or you're going to be mixing and matching direct items rather than transmogging. I wonder if this is going to stay this way. I kind of have a sense that they might add this in at some point. I hope they do. Lastly, endgame. Yeah, endgame crafting, I don't know. Do y'all know? I have no clue. I have heard that the best items that drop in the game are worse than the best items you can craft. I hope that's true, but I can't verify it. So, TBD, crafting a new world. All right, next. Next. Let's talk about the thing that had no representation whatsoever. I just realized all these videos are playing at 1 1/4 speed. Huh. Anyway. Thing that was completely missing from the public test 1 year ago, dungeons. The body of New World. PvE. Okay, let's skip ahead a bit here. So first, before I talk about dungeons, I'm going to briefly talk about the open world questing experience. Open world quests break down into 2 types. Number 1 is stuff that is repeatable and random. These are primarily gotten from the town board, like I mentioned before, or from your faction leader within a settlement. So the Marauder leader, the Syndicate leader, the Covenant leader within each settlement will give you randomly generated PvE and PvP missions you can go out to within the zone and do. Most of the quests that you'll do will probably be those kinds. The other kind of quests are the kind of quests that you do once and they're done forever. And those shake down into main stories. There's a main story thread, which doesn't take you through every single moment in your open world experience. It's going to be something that you do, and then you level up a bunch and you do some more. And then side stories, side quests, staple of MMOs. And these side quests are composed of people who you run into out in the world or in settlements. They'll give you a little spiel about who they are and what they want you to do. You'll go out and do it. One of the things that seems to be notably missing from New World are NPCs who move around, friendly NPCs who move around or engage in combat. The only friendly NPCs you'll encounter are completely stationary. And every single NPC that moves is an enemy. I don't know if that's a technological deficit or a style decision or what. It does serve to make the world feel alive when it's filled with other players, but when it's not, it is rather dead feeling. Maybe that's a good thing. But that's the way it is. The voice acting is surprisingly good on these quest prompts, but the NPCs, and they do a lot of work in making the NPCs feel alive, because without it, they're quite static and dead. There are 3 objectives for quests in New World. This applies to every single quest I've done so far. Kill X monster type, retrieve X monster drops, which is sort of indirectly kill X monster type, and loot X chest drops, which are around monsters. They're extremely formulaic, and you'll get to a point where you stop paying attention to them, where all you're doing is following quest markers, and when you get to the area, you're just killing and looting everything. And eventually, the quest will tell you it's done. You don't think about it too hard. Thoughts. This kind of relegates open world in this experience. Unflagged open world is kind of like side screen content. You don't really want to have your whole mind focused on this experience, because after the first few hours, it's not that good. It's very threadbare. However, if you are flagged up, it can become very different. If you are flagged up, then there's risk of ganking or finding someone to gank when you're out in the world. Now, as I said, like 1 in 20 players is actually going to be flagged up. But if you flag up, and if something changes in the game, more people start flagging up, then, I don't know. I think that's where the fun is in the game. I mentioned at the start of the video that for me, New World is at its best when PvP risk and PvE thrills are combined. Because this ain't such a thrilling experience, it would be really cool if there was incentive for people to be PvP flagged in these areas of the world. Next, oh yeah, I've noticed that between the public test last year and the closed beta test this year, that the difficulty of open world mobs has been drastically reduced. I'm not sure how this happened mechanically, but I was reviewing the video that I made last year, and while watching it, I realized that monsters that were 1 or 2 level higher to me at that time were an enormous threat to me, to the point where if I had 2 instead of 1, I basically had to run away. Now, I can easily take on 2, 3, 4 mobs of the same level or a couple levels higher than me. I'm certain that the stagger change is part of this, but I don't think it's all of it. I think there's been a general open world PvE mob nerf that's happened. I'll have some comments here in the chat. I'm going to read those before I talk about my dungeon experience. Let's see. Kai says, is it possible to only engage in PvP systems and ignore the crafting and questing? Or are they compulsory and the PvP is a minigame on the side? I think that you would be hard-pressed to level up from PvP only. And the trick is, in order to, and I'm going to talk about progression more later, but in order to unlock weapon skills and masteries, you have to engage in combat. And because PvP in the game is, the territorial PvP game is so gated and based on voluntary engagement in world PvP, which is uncommon, and wars, which are going to be uncommon too. If you're playing 3-4 hours a day, then wars are going to be something that you do for a few hours a week, max. So you will need to probably end up fighting PvE mobs, if nothing else, but to level your weapon masteries, and having some source of experience other than PvP, based on what I've seen so far. I would not say that PvP is a minigame on the side. I do think it is a core important part of the game, but I don't think it's an equivalent part of the game. I think it's meant to be... PvP is sort of meant to be almost like a payoff for PvE in the way that the game is currently designed, is, I think, one of the ways you can see it. I might be misreading that, but I think that that's a potentially valid way of seeing it. Rel says, there's some nuance to the evolution of these quests that you appreciate. For example, go to loot X chest quests you mentioned will always give you the quest item from a chest you have not yet looted. No more random trans traps. Rel, that's a good point. So, traditional MMO design would have you opening up, 25 chests to get 5 loot drops, right? But in New World, it's pretty much 1-to-1. Mobs will always drop the quest item. Chests will always drop the quest item. I feel like I've been in situations where there have been some times where it's more like half the time, but that's probably the worst I've seen. Yeah, you see me using the execute skill on the Great Axe. Love that. So yeah, I suppose that comment about the questing experience is sort of common across the game, where it seems like at Amazon Game Studios there's been this kind of design discussion that's been like, let's not reinvent the wheel, let's polish the wheel. So when they realized they needed to add quests, they did so, but it seems like there's a deliberate choice to add things in a way that is not... This is more of a sense feeling. This is like a very right brain sense ability. But it seems like that they've tried to add almost like from a design perspective, minimum viable product to meet these needs. Rather than going nuts and saying, how can we do the most badass thing? The rule of cool. They've said, we want to achieve X. What does X minimally mean? Open world quests. Kill mob, loot chest. They don't make it more complicated. And I think there's an argument to be made that it doesn't need to be more complicated. Maybe they're right. Maybe boiling down open world questing to that is what's best. In fact, one of the things I find the most frustrating about more modern MMOs, like let's say World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, is sometimes when you're playing open world content, you want to be like on the Discord call with your friends. You want to be watching a YouTube video or listening to a podcast. Like, I think that there's a real cognizance of that with the way this is designed. And the open world is not designed to be edge of your seat, fully attention grabbing. And maybe the PvP flagging system is a benefit of that. I know I've kind of dogged on people who don't flag up. But there's a sense of spareness in the game that I think when you hear me say that word, you can hear it and think of it in a pejorative sense. Well, spare means not enough. But I think of the phrase, enough is as good as a feast. I'm not sure if you'll have heard that phrase before, but it's the idea that it's just as good to have enough of what you need as it is to have too much of what you need. Rel says everything feels very deliberate. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It feels like a very professional design attempt. And I find that sense very comforting. So a good example of the opposite of this, right, would be World of Warcraft Classic, Vanilla. That's a game that was designed by a bunch of people who were not at all deliberate. They were all doing just whatever seemed cool to them as individuals. One of the big problems that WoW Classic has had is the world buff meta, which emerged from that very problem. Or because there's no deliberate system to be like, okay, we need to make sure that our game doesn't give powerful world buffs that people end up systematically requiring in order to play organized group content. I feel like New World is the kind of game that has almost like vaccinated against that kind of problem. And if there is any risk for them, it may be that rather than failing to design something that is effective at what it does, that they may fail to take bigger design risks that have bigger payoffs. That may be the downside of the approach they're taking. But again, this is very speculative, very based on conjecture. But that's the overall vibe. And that vibe is consistent here in the dungeon. Which, if you're like me, you don't want to watch my face. You want to watch the dungeon. That's way more cool. This is the Amrine Excavation. It's the level 25 dungeon. It's the only one I got to experience in the beta because I couldn't put in more levels than that. I'm not sure how high level you got, Rel, or y'all who are watching on YouTube, but I got to level 35 roughly, I think, as of today. And it's a dungeon. You go in, there are a bunch of rooms full with mobs, and it's designed in such a way that you end up clearing everything. It may be that there is a yet to be discovered way of skipping encounters, which is kind of the time old problem. Sorry, the age old problem of dungeon design in MMOs is you see that these dungeons, they're designed like, I think of Black Rock Depths from World of Warcraft is kind of the quintessential example, where they're like, what we want to do is design this enormous maze-like thing that feels like a real place. And if you ask yourself the question, what would a dark iron door city look like? What you get is Black Rock Depths. But then what you end up with in terms of gameplay experience is people are always skipping. People are always finding exploits to just do what they want. And Amrine Excavation and the videos I've seen of the other two dungeons that are in level 45 and 60 seem like they have this knowledge of player behavior in hand. And the requirements of the player to deal with trash mobs don't seem overly onerous, and they don't seem skippable. This dungeon has two bosses, a mini boss and an end boss. I'm gonna skip ahead, see if I can find one of them. Those guys hit hard, man. They wreck. Oh, I think that's it. I think that's... Yeah, this is one of the bosses. Foreman Nakashima. So this is a caster boss who's this weird purple ghost thing, and he has a few things that he does. Number one, he'll lay down that purple circular effect. As you can see, the effect is larger than the telegraph. Hopefully they'll fix that, which stuns you. He also will do this move where he summons these ghosts off on the flanks that then you can dodge between to avoid their damage. See, let's see, it spawns a row of four ghosts where there's one gap in the line that you can step into. Do kind of like, almost like semi-Frogger thing. There's that ability, which I guess splits the group up so you're not stacked on the boss and you don't eat a bunch of them. This is the first boss I played in New World and answered the question of, will this game have named bosses with actual mechanics? And the answer is yes. And you can see the Trinity design paying off too. I'm wearing a sword and a shield with a high constitution for my level. I'm tanking this dungeon. One of the other players, I think it's Eileen Kelly, is healing the dungeon. The green circles you see on the floor is the game's answer to healing. There's a life staff weapon which heals the party and yourself. The game has everything you'd expect to have in a dungeon and nothing more. The last boss in this dungeon actually gave us some trouble. Simon Gray. This is the only bit of exposition in the whole dungeon, so I'm going to show it off. Actually, let's listen to this, actually. This will be fun. I think people will like this. The hidden chests are cool. You mean like off in the corners, Rel? Or maybe there's a hidden chest I didn't even know about. Did you say Utini?
It must be another language.
Oh, this is Simon Gray.
Just watch the big...
All right. He looks like a Simon. True. This fight was actually pretty tough for us. I know people have said this dungeon is easy, and I suppose it is, but we didn't know what we were doing. He constantly has ads up. If you kill all three of them, he spawns a new set of 3. The cool thing is that when he's spawning them in, he doesn't do anything else, so you can get in a bunch of free damage on him. So that ad's going to die. He's going to stop. Summon some more. Anyway, that's how the fight goes. Like the one in the water. That's right, Rel. I guess there's a little bit of exploration to do because there's the one room. That's the room with the three platforms that you stand on, right? And if you circle around clockwise downward, yeah. But again, even that little nod to exploration. If you poke around this end room here with the boss, it kind of looks like a place you should be able to explore, but you can't. That's one of my questions is this going to be a place where we're exploring around, or is it a place where we're just kind of following a linear progression? And it seemed it was more like we're following a linear progression. Maybe later dungeons will elaborate on that. Maybe it'll get more complicated. I don't know. But that's what this was. Rel says, agreed, it'd be great to be able to parkour this place. Totally agree with that. Especially if they designed it in such a way that, like, they separated the exploration experience from the combat experience. So, like, after you finish the dungeon, maybe there were incentives to go around and explore things or stuff like that, or do secret bosses that only open up after you do it. Guild Wars 2 had a system where they had dungeons that had explorable paths, where you can go down different paths. I'm not sure if that's a great design, but I mean, dungeons are such ripe soil. One of the things about skipping in Blackrock Depths or skipping in general is that players feel good about doing it, about figuring out those little secrets. I agree with you, Rel, but one thing that it does is it alienates people who are not at the same level of progression. So if you're going into Blackrock Depths for the first time and you go in with someone who's been in there 5 times and they're in there with someone who's been there 50 times, the person who's been in there 50 times is going to find the 5 times person to be slow and annoying, and the person who's been in there 5 times is going to find the first timer to be slow and annoying. And the person who's been there for the first time is going to feel rushed, like they're not getting to experience the content. That might necessarily be a problem that needs to be solved, but it is a problem that happens. And as someone like me, who I like to experience the content at a slower pace, if there's a story being told, if there's a cutscene being played, if there's an NPC to talk to, I want to engage with all those things. But most people I play with, all they want to engage with is the optimal route of reward manifestation. And so usually there's a little bit of social peer pressure when it comes to that. So my sense is that they designed this experience with that reality in mind, because there's not much to do other than fight and the one chest you mentioned. Kai reminds you of SWTOR, where everyone always moaned about new players not skipping cuts. Yeah, like this is the problem with doing that kind of content in dungeons, is you're always going to have the tension between people who have been there 10 times and people who have been there for the first time. Ideally, you want to make it harmonious for people to be there at different levels of experience, or you want to make it so that people at different levels of experience are not doing the same content, so that people who do show up all have similar motivations. Tragic, I was checking out Shadowlands earlier this year on your prop palette and got kicked from a dungeon because you didn't know how to thread the needle on some trash pulls. Exactly. That's like another example of why this dungeon design, for all of its simplicity, jumped out at me. Because the few times there were opportunities for skips, you were also skipping a reward chest, which there might be situations where you'd want to do that, but that seems like that's exactly what people are there to do, to get loot. Anyway, what else do I have about dungeons written down here? Dungeons are dungeony. Wow, very smart, Deeg. Pacing is good. Yep. The gameplay is straightforward. Yep. Again, it's not trying to do too much heavy lifting. I think the most complicated mechanic in this dungeon was look at that eye candy, man. The most complicated mechanic in this dungeon was the room where you had to stand on the 3 plates in order to instantiate the mini boss event. Now, when I ran it, someone else told me about this, but I did wonder what that would have looked like to have experienced for the first time. Telegraphs I mentioned. I've heard reports that the last 2 dungeons are harder. Mention that too. Yeah. Okay. Tragic says, you do like the feeling of learning the content, being able to optimize it and find out all the tricks, right? Yeah, that's the tension. Having a line of progression for people who are there a long time versus having an enjoyable experience for people who are there once. I don't think there's a real answer to that question here. But then again, this is a leveling dungeon, so I think most players are probably only going to play through it once. It is Barkimedes. There's a lot of value in the social currency you gain from that too, Rel says. Learning how to do something that you then get to share. True. True. All this has me questioning what the end game dungeons are going to be like, because that's what people will get to experience more of, right? As much as people talk about experiences like, let's say, what's the name of the mine dungeon in Westfall from WoW Classic? The Defias. Von Cleef is the end enemy. I can't think of the name of the dungeon. Anyway, that dungeon. I think, in fact, a lot of people have good impressions of it. Is most people who are there for the first time, or there for the first time on a character, and their motivations all line up. You don't really have people who are repeating that dungeon over and over again because they level past it. They complete the quest that brought them in there and gave them the nice payoff, and now they're ready to continue their adventure. But then again, maybe all dungeons, maybe endgame dungeons will be designed to be played through only a few times. Who knows? These are some of the important questions, which is going to be reserved for the very end of this discussion where I talk about the future of the game. Just have to say. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about after PvE, which I described as the body of New World. I mean that in like a sexy, like attractive manner. A lot of people are going to be attracted to the PvE. Is the mind of New World. The progression experience. The individual progression. Maybe my body parts metaphor is breaking down here, but... So there's not a lot for me to say about the progression in New World. Experience is gained from doing everything. In the 2020 public test, the best way to level up was to spam events in the open world. In the 2021 closed beta, the best way to do it is to spam town board quests, like I mentioned before. I imagine when the public release happens, the retail release happens in a month, that there'll be a new best way. Character levels gate access to gear slots. So having a second weapon, having additional bags so you can improve your carry capacity, things like that. Rings and amulets. But also, every time you level up, you get a bucket of assignable attribute points, which you can pool into strength, dexterity, intelligence, focus, or constitution. And these, all these individual attributes pay off differently for your character. So the first three, strength, dex, and int, are all weapon stats, where they are all directly correlated with certain kinds of weapons. So dexterity is going to impact your range weapon damage, muskets and bows, and also a few other one-handed weapons. Strength is going to impact things like sword and shield, two-handed weapons like the great axe and the warhammer, stuff like that. Intelligence is for caster weapons, so like the frost gauntlet, the life staff, and the fire staff. One of the neat things about this is that pool of attribute points, you can reassign at any time. There's a small gold cost, which the highest I saw it get was like 182 gold for my character at level 35, with having like 10 times that amount of gold on me at the time, just from leveling up and playing the game, not doing anything special. And every 50 points in each attribute, you get a different kind of payoff. So like, for example, at a 100 constitution, you get a perk where you gain, for every, let me say this correctly. You gain a perk where your 10% of your armor value is converted into health. So it gives you a higher maximum health pool. And at 100 strength, you can carry around 20 more pounds of loot, and all of your heavy attacks do 10% more damage, something like that. And the different stats have different perks at different thresholds every 50 points. I haven't looked at what the top level payoffs are, like the 300 level payoff. I think for strength, the 300 level attribute was something like adding grit to all of your attacks, which sounds crazy. Grit is a player adjective that makes it so that you cannot be staggered or interrupted while you're performing an action. So that would be interesting to have. In addition to that, there's also weapon progression. So each of the weapons, you see some of those on the screen here. Let's find some gameplay, not inventory management, shall we? Each of the weapons has a mastery rank from 1 to 20. Maybe it's 0 to 20. And every time you improve your mastery rank from a weapon, which is not connected to your player level, and which you do by using the weapon, very Skyrim style in that way, you gain a mastery point. each weapon tree has each weapon has two different trees, kind of two different sides of each weapon. So let's think of an example. Sword and shield. This is a very clear delineation. You can either progress your shield's defensive capabilities or your sword's offensive capabilities, depending on which tree you put points in. Each tree for each weapon has up to 3 activatable skills that you can slot into your bar, which you can slot a maximum of 3. So if you have a rank 20 weapon, then you'll have enough points so that you can unlock 3 skills on this tree and 3 skills on this tree, but you only be able to combine a combination of 3 of those into your skill bar. So there's no reason to put mastery points into skills that you don't intend to be using. Like your attributes, your weapon mastery talents can be reconfigured at any time. But instead of being gated by gold, it's gated by Azoth. This is the second time during this talk I've mentioned Azoth. It is a currency that impacts, so far, the ability to increase the proc chance of a special perk on crafting, and the ability to change around your weapon build. And the last thing it does, which is not related to this point, is it gates travel in the open world. I think we're going to see an example of it right here. I'm in the noob gathering area at the moment. Am I going to kill this guy? I'm going to try. And he gets another water. Let's go. Is he going to make it to the travel shrine? I think he's going to make it. Yeah. I kill that fucking rabbit in rage. Screw that rabbit. Okay. Am I not going to the shrine? Here we go. Okay. Come on, Greg. What are you doing? We're going over land, apparently. Anyway. So, fast travel in the game. This game has fast travel. It doesn't have mounts. Fast travel has a few different convenient ways of moving around the world. Number one, you can bind yourself to one inn in the world. There's an inn in each settlement. Every single hour, for free, you can recall to that inn from anywhere in the world. That's number one. Number two, any settlement, you can buy a house. If you own the house and you pay the upkeep for that house, which is like a property tax, that tax rate, by the way, is set by the governor of the company who owns the settlement and the surrounding territory. Any house that you have upkeep paid for, you can transport to. You can recall to once every 4 hours. I think that those timers are not linked. So if you have a house in Everfall and you have a house in Monarch's Bluff, you can recall to one and then recall to the other, and they'll have their own independent 4-hour timers. Maybe someone can verify that for me. I only had one house in the beta, not that rich. The last way of moving around the world is if you've already been to a fast travel shrine, which you just saw one of a few moments ago, or if you've already been to a settlement. Whenever you're in a travel shrine or a settlement, you can fast travel between them by opening up the world map by paying an Azoth cost. So if I travel to Windsward by foot from Monarch's Bluff, as my character did in the beta, and then I recall back to Monarch's Bluff to do all my crafting and whatever, and then let's say my friend's back in Windsward and I want to go meet up with him. I can, from inside the settlement of Monarch's Bluff, fast travel back to Windsward, but I have to pay an Azoth cost. So that's the third way that Azoth is used in the game. I'm going to save any more discussion about Azoth for a little bit later. What else? Oh, housing. Yeah, I should mention housing, I guess. So, housing in New World, it seems pretty interesting. There are a number of houses with differing costs, upfront costs to buy. Once you pay the upfront cost, there's a property tax you have to pay. And the first house you buy in a starter zone has a discount on it. So, for example, all the cheapest house in Monarch's Bluff costs 5,000 gold, but I received a first-time home buyer's discount and bought it for 2,500 gold. Once you have a house, you can fill it with knickknacks, with furniture. And furniture, when placed in the house, in some way improves the score of your house. And if you have a highly decorated, high-scoring house, it'll be displayed as an option for players within the settlement to tour. The settlement will rank the top 10 versions of each house in terms of decoration score and make them visible to the public. So if you don't want people to see your house, don't decorate it. Additionally, there are things you can do in your house in terms of decorations that will give you buffs and abilities outside the house. I already mentioned that you have the house recall every 4 hours. One of the last things I learned over this weekend is that you can actually, if you progress your furniture making skill, which is one of the professions, you can make a log storage chest, which when placed in your house, improves your storage capacity at that settlement by a chunky 250 pounds, which is great. One of the things that my character most values is storage space, because I'm always gathering stuff, but I craft very sluggishly. So I just have a whole horde of resources and materials I don't want to deal with. So, but additionally, there are places in each house to place trophies. And I don't know exactly what these trophies do or what they look like. I've never received one, but they give you some kind of a boon that impacts you when you're out in the world. Tragic Johnson asks, if your house looks scuffed, can the Hoa kick you out? No, but if you don't pay your property tax, then you no longer reap any of the boons or house recalls or any other benefit from your house. So there's that. The funny thing, one of the funny interactions and questions that I had was, well, I own a house in Monarch's Bluff. This actually happened during the closed beta. And a company from an enemy faction actually attacked us and took over the settlement. And my question was, do I get kicked out of my house if the other faction takes over the settlement? And the answer is no. Game doesn't care. A little weird. I kind of thought it would care, but it doesn't. You can own houses in settlements controlled by any faction, like I mentioned earlier. The territorial open world PvP game is kind of like its own thing, and Amazon Game Studios has taken pains to make sure that people who want to play that part of the game don't fuck with people who don't. Look at this, open world PvP. We're fighting at one of the Ford and Windsward. This started out pretty fun, but eventually they brought more dudes and it stopped being fun. As a planet-side reference for y'all. This guy's gonna wreck me, I think. Yeah, you got me. Okay. The last thing I'll say about housing is that although you can unlock some boons with housing and you can decorate to get a high score to show your house off, my sense of housing is that it doesn't feel a lot like housing like in traditional RPGs. Right now, it's not really a place you can kind of customize and make your own very easily, from what I can tell. Maybe once you get a lot of furniture unlocked, this changes. But to me, it seems like a thing that most people are going to use as kind of like a museum. A museum for buffs, like a trophy shelf. And maybe there's nothing wrong with that. I would like to be proven wrong and see people make really compelling houses. It's possible for anyone you're partied up with to visit your house as well. But beyond that, and appearing on the leaderboard, no one else is going to see your house. So, I don't know. That's one system that I didn't spend enough time with to develop any further thoughts on, but it's there. The last thing about progression for personal players. So I mentioned level progression, attribute progression, weapon mastery progression, housing progression. There's also a sort of PvE progression that occurs by pursuing the main quest. Um, as you go through the main quest, you're going to build and then upgrade your Azoth staff, and the Azoth staff is going to let you take on higher level PvE events. So if you don't have a high enough Azoth staff, you can't do certain kinds of events. But if you play the main quest, you won't even notice this. It'll just be something that you already have when you get there. I mentioned that the house was more like a museum. I think that decoupling your player level from your weapon, from your combat weapon level, is a pretty interesting choice. I think I like it. I think that leveling up your weapon by using it feels good. Rel, you like those low corruption events, just kind of like rifts. Yep, exactly. Exactly. So in order to actually close those corruption rifts, you need to have an Azoth staff at a certain level. Other stuff. PvP scaling exists. I'm not sure if it's used everywhere or just in some places, but it sure as hell does exist. There is some kind of normalization that occurs. I think it's got mainly to do with health totals and attributes, but I might be wrong. Because I know that for a fact, if you're a high-level character with a leveled up weapon and well-made gear, you will trounce the best, most well-geared, low-level player. So some things are normalized, some things are not. That functionally means that you will find situations where high-level players who are tuned out, not paying attention, will get beaten up by low-level players who are playing well and know what they're doing. So I think this is generally a good system. I would kind of like if it were a little more transparent about how it worked, but on the other hand, I think that, look at this. This is what I want open world PvP to feel more like. This is like the planet-side fantasy of open field combat. These guys are retreating from the fort and we're chasing them down. This is actually kind of a frustrating experience. Let's see it play out. And everyone here's different level. So on level 22, the guy in front of me is a friend, is level 20. What level are these enemies? Let's see. I can't quite read it. South Shore versus Hills Brad. Hell yes, Raul. You are on my wavelength, brother. I can't read their levels. Black on red, or red on black. Anyway, oh, here's this guy. He is 24. So that's close to my level. They did something interesting here. They ran up to the top level of this house to bottleneck us. And because there's body blocking, we couldn't all get up. I mean, we still get them because the power of AoEs in this game, but it was a pretty interesting tactic that they took. This is the kind of thing that happens if you PvP flag. But if you don't PvP flag, it doesn't happen. You don't get those cool moments. And it looks like I'm doing a war for Everfall here. I don't remember this war. I think this was a one-sided loss, if I remember right. Or just the one that we won. I don't remember. I just let it play out. Why am I doing this? Anyway. Okay. Couple of thoughts about player progression. I mentioned PvP scaling exists. Overall, the system of weapon progression and attribute allotment reminds me a lot of Guild Wars 1. And that's kind of a positive comparison. Guild Wars is a game that really enabled people to really participate in buildcraft. And I have a sense that they want people playing New World to do this as well. part of this is from the sense that every single character can do every single thing. You don't pick a player class. I like that. I like that if I want to dabble in playing a healer, all I need to do is get the right gear and level up my life staff at some point. That's fun. In 2021, I'm not sure if player class is one of those choices that most players are excited to make anymore. Last thing I'm going to say is I think people is meant. I think people is meant to max out pretty quickly with gear system picking up from there. Right. So you're going to get to a point level 60 where you have a fixed pool of attributes you're playing with, where you've maxed out the primary weapons you care about, and then it's going to be more about build craft and unlocking gear, and maybe doing some horizontal progression with unlocking additional weapons and getting some alternate gear sets. But I don't have the sense people are going to be living for very long in the vertical power progression of individual weapons and attribute points. Judging by the fact that a lot of people got to level 60 within 2 weeks, even though the leveling rate was expedited and even though there were some bugs, I don't think people are going to be living at lowest level if they're playing the game daily for extended periods of time. I don't think that MMOs... It doesn't seem like it's something MMOs should do anymore, does it? Okay. What else do I have for y'all today? Oh, we're not done yet at all. I want to talk about some of the social features. The things that hit closest to my heart. I call this the mouth of New World. New World has proximity voice chat. I love this. Let me describe to you some of my favorite moments from the closed beta. So, the very first day, I was, where was I? I was questing in Monarch's Bluff, where me and my friends rolled up. We're all lucky enough to play to get in the same zone, so that was, awesome. But my friends had logged off. I was playing by myself, and I ran into this guy. He was wearing one of the wide brim hats you get with like medium armor, leather armor, and he had a rapier and a musket. And the dude started sniping at me with his musket. His name was something like Lord Soggy Bags or Lord Soggy Baggins, something like that. And the guy taunted me over Prox chat when I started hiding behind the trees. So what you trying to do? Are you trying to hide? Teasing me out in this British accent, right? But I was just a melee guy. I think I had at the time a great axe and a sword and shield. And he was just going to keep kiting me with his musket. So I lined beside him behind some trees and made him come and get me, which he did. And we ended up having a fight, and I ended up turning the tables on him. And then I was chasing him down with him at low health. And if you know the Great Axe in this game, you know the Great Axe has a charge ability, so I could close the gap. And as I was chasing him and he was low on health, he said these words that I'm never going to forget. It was just a joke, bro. This is after we've been fighting for the last 5 minutes. And I ganked him. And then I ran into him next day and I ganked him again. And then I ran to him in town after that. And as I was at the faction vendor, I heard someone screaming by, "Fuck you, Deeg!" on Prox voice. It was that guy. And I saw him a couple more times and I waved at him. I didn't try to kill him again after that. But those are the kinds of fun engagements you can have with Prox voice. It opens up the ability to connect, talk shit, and respect your enemies in ways that can never happen with just text chat and just emotes. And I had a handful of other kinds of encounters like that out in the open world with Prox voice. Another guy who was dueling me, who he had his shift key got stuck. So every time his stamina went up, he was just dodging and he couldn't control it. But he just kept kiting me and I couldn't catch up with him. And eventually we agreed to part ways because I couldn't kill him and he couldn't kill me. And we're just like, all right, man, Hope you enjoy the rest of your beta. Hope you fix your keyboard issue. And I just love those experiences to death. They so, to me, underline this sense that I see or am hoping to see in the game of a prioritization on the social part of gaming. And I really hope nothing bad happens to Prox Voice. Even though game companies at this point in the game are heavily incentivized to not include stuff like this in games where they can be abused and people can be made to feel bad. Now, with Prox Voice, I do have a critique. You cannot participate in it if you're in a party. When you're in a party, your Prox Voice gets replaced with Party Voice, which means you can no longer communicate with your enemies, which I don't like. Prox Voice should always be available. You should have a second keybind for Prox Voice and Party Voice. Come on, Bezos. Come on, Amazon. Let's get this done. Let me play in Prox Voice. It's got emotes. They seem to be pretty cool. They're expressive. They're well animated. Not much more to say there. There are premium emotes you can unlock for money. So that's one of the cosmetics that they're going to sell. There's player trading. That's a social system. So you can directly trade items between each other. Loot that you get out in the world, for the most part, is bind on equip. There are some things you'll get, like dungeon drops, that are bind on pickup. And if you get a bind on equip item, as long as you don't equip it and bind it to yourself, you can trade it to your friend. Very nice. There's groups, of course. I mentioned companies before as like the guild or outfit or clan equivalent for this game. Another big social feature. And of course, one of the biggest social features that you'll run into in the game is the Holy Trinity. Tanks, DPS, and healers, which this game didn't try to reinvent, and I think that's to its credit. Like I was saying earlier, in terms of the way its group design works, it feels kind of spare. It's not trying to do anything too fancy. It's just trying to do it well and combine ingredients that already work in a way that might thrill us. Tragic says they can put Bezos on the moon, but they can't add a second keybind. Maybe they don't want to. Well, regarding Prox Voice, you don't know. You get that ring leader mentality that comes from groups. Could totally see it being more toxic, that people rolling around in groups stomping solo players. Yeah, and Rel, I suspect that what you just said could have been their justification for making Party Voice replace Prox Voice. They might see it as an elegant solution to the BM problem, and BM, just like any kind of toxic behavior, is always amplified when you have backup, right? When the potential of repercussions are low. I acknowledge this. I agree with you, but I still want Prox Voice at all times. Let me curate whether I'm listening to Prox Voice or not. Let me turn it on. Let me and all the shit talkers talk shit to each other, because that is like, that's what real human interaction is like. At any moment, people can talk shit at you. Just mute them. Yeah, but here's the thing. You can mute them, but I won't. That's me. I'm a podcaster. I'm a talker. I'm a gabber. If someone talks shit to me, you know what that is? That is an opportunity to connect. I want to say, why, thank you for fucking my mother. I'm sure she appreciated that. How's your day? How's your mom? It's all about the human connection, folks. And I tell you, some of the most interesting connections I've had in online games is when someone has engaged with me in that way, not just flipped it on its head, just like that. There's a part of people's brains that activates, this lizard, like the lizard reptilian part of their brain. It's like, must unleash. And if you just invoke a higher level of awareness, that's all it can take sometimes. All of a sudden, you turn an animal into a human. Tragic, I can just imagine someone questing in the wilderness and they hear some soft-spoken Deeg voice. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Exactly what I'm talking about. In this game, you can go prone. When you go prone, it hides your nameplate. I don't know if people can hear you in Prox voice when you're prone, but that's what I love to imagine. I want to lurk on the roadside and sing a little lullaby while I'm prone in the bushes. See if anyone comes to talk to me. I'm just lonely, folks. I need Prox voice. Come on, hook me up. Okay. So the next couple things I have here is we're going to... Kai, you would mute Deeg. You would not. You would not. Let's sum this thing up, and then after I kind of drive home my thesis, I'm going to talk about some of the kind of community conversation that I've heard about the game, respond to a couple of those things, and then lastly, we're going to make some guesses about the future for New World. So, to sum it up, New World is a PvP game that some will love and most will ignore. New World is playing catch-up on its PvE and will rely on your trust in engaging with it. New World has beautiful bones in need of beautiful flesh. New World feels like a game designed around player interactions. And Amazon Game Studios will be tempted to design away the inconvenience of other players. Question is, will they fight that temptation? Kai, you can always ask a question, brother. I'm pretty sure this war is one of my losses. I lost 2 or 3 wars and I won 2. Kai, the game world was initially based on semi-real life scenario, but all that was overhauled. What did they replace the enemies world design features with? So I didn't play the early alpha. I didn't have my hands on it. My understanding is that there were 2 major changes. Number 1, the game was full loot hardcore PvP. With I think a similar version of this territorial control system. I think also it didn't have factions originally, so you could literally fight everybody. And the only way to faction up would be to like join a party or join a company. I don't know if it was based on a semi-real life scenario. I'm not sure if that's true. The other big thing that they changed was the design of NPCs. NPCs in this world, the enemy faction, were originally a humanoid race of some kind. And that, at some point in development, was redirected towards these fantasy tropes of skeletons, ghosts, undead, dryads, because it was seen as culturally insensitive to have us European conquistadors taking over a continent of dark-skinned natives. Hard to imagine why. And I don't know everything that was missing from that original design. I do know that since last year, dungeons were added, voice acting was added, a dialogue system for the questing system was added. Does the game world feel kind of shallow and bland as a result? Doesn't feel that way to me. No, it doesn't feel that way to me. But then again, I've only played for like 60, 70 hours. What's up, Unreal? What's cooking good looking? All the stuff you've seen just looks like very generic, mindless zombies. Kai, if you're playing the game for the lore and the world design, you will find it shallow and bland. I think that's a fair critique. It's very tropey. They're not breaking new ground where that's concerned. And this is like my overall thesis for New World, is it's not really breaking new ground with anything that it's doing. What it's trying to do is the same thing World of Warcraft tried to do back in 2004, where it's trying to package up something that people already like into a package that they don't know that they will like. So things like the skill shot based, like Souls light combat. Things like having a very heavy survivalist crafting system. Look at the boldness of that. Going out into the Zerg. Now I run away into the bushes. I would say that if you wanted to get excited about New World, to me, the core excitement of it is on the back of the social systems that are reinforced by the territory game and the open world PvP that are going to play out in places like dungeons and any place where coordination in the open world is happening. Proximity voice, emotes, settlement takeover and defense. That's what I find interesting. Like I said, it's not the best PvP game out there. It's not the best PvE game out there. But what it could be is a very compelling and unique combination of both. And if you approach it as someone who only wants one thing or the other, you're pretty likely to find it lacking. And Amazon Games is going to be incentivized in some levels to narrow down on one of those two focuses. And I hope they don't. I hope they don't. I hope they keep those two pillars of equal weight. One thing I didn't really mention very much is that there are two ways of engaging with the game I haven't really discussed, and those are invasions and outpost rush. I didn't discuss these yet because I haven't played them myself. They're gated behind high levels. Outpost rush seems to be a PvE PvP hybrid mode where you're like capturing territory, and unlike wars, it's something you can just queue into and play. You don't have to capture or declare war or play this company territorial control game in order to play an outpost rush. I suspect that over time, most people who play the game are not going to be playing the territory game. This is actually a fear that I have. That the territory game is going to end up being something that is played primarily by large communities and streamers. And while everyone else plays open world PvE and dungeons with their PvP flag turned off, and when they want a PvP, they play an outpost rush. Something like that. There are also invasions, which are kind of like a horde mode where settlements are attacked and you have to defend them from NPCs. They seem to be pretty tough. Kai, that's a shame to think the best bit of the game by far. Yeah, I think it is. And I don't think it would be improved in making it more accessible. But the level of access to the territory game is something that I'm watching. So let's see if I can find a map here. Did I look at the map at all in this VOD? I feel like I did, around the middle. How many zones are in the world? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There must be like 12-ish zones in the open beta world. I think that a bigger map for the game has been data mined, where we can expect another, I don't know, like let's say a maximum of 8 more zones to make 20 zones. What that's going to mean is that only 20 different companies on a server are going to be able to, on a day-to-day basis, engage with the territory game. Now, you can play in wars and participate in PvP quests without being in a company that declares a war. That's true. So, like, of the wars that I was in, the 5 wars, only in 3 of those wars only in 2 of those wars was I in the company who declared the war or who the war was declared against. And everywhere else, I signed up to be on the standby list, which you can see here on the right side. And I was brought in as kind of like a substitute. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this space won't be aggressively filled up by well-organized companies. And maybe you'll have a handful of people with a lot of money who are just bringing in standbys and friends. I don't know. I really want to see how this territory system plays out when we reach the steady state of the end game. where the server is no longer growing in population. What's that going to look like? I don't know. I think that people are going to feel like the level of effort required to play in that content is going to be higher than they want, because they're going to have to play with communities. And it's been shown that when it comes to MMOs, most people just want to play alone together. And that's where things like Outpost Rush comes in. And Dungeons. Even though they're cooperative content, you know. I don't know. At this point, I'm getting into land of conjecture. Things I can't necessarily speak with a lot of confidence on. So a couple of community hot topics. I'm going to start with the smaller ones and progress to what I see as the bigger ones. Number one is Stagger. So Stagger is a feature of the combat system that used to be pretty important and no longer is. There are, of course, control effects in New World. So you can inflict stuns, you can do knockbacks, you can... There's even a hammer ability that makes you flatten the enemy, which basically means you just knock them down, but it insists on calling it a flatten effect, which I think is hilarious. But when you do a light attack or a heavy attack, that doesn't stop the action of the enemy in any way. It used to be in New World that whenever you were hit by any attack, you staggered in some way, which placed a premium on positioning and avoiding attacks in the old version of New World that has been changed in the new version. My read, the reason this was changed is, of course, because there were some outlier weapons and abilities in the public test that can abuse the stagger mechanic to lock a player out of performing any actions, and that's not fun and it sucks. The hatchet was the main kind of perpetrator of this in the public test. But I think that the better reason for removing or mitigating stagger from light and heavy attacks, it's got less to do with the one-on-one engagements and more to do with group play. Because when you're playing with groups of mobs or groups of players, it becomes trivial to stagger lock and prevent people from making any actions when there are large groups at play, which is not very fun. And I think that's a major problem. It was a major concern I had when I made my video about New World last year, and I think they've addressed it. But there's a lot of people in the community who are stands for Stagger, and they want Stagger back. And I think that the combat system has been diluted by mitigating this mechanic. And in some senses, they're right. The truth is that one-on-one duels are not going to be as deep and exciting as they were back then. And the complexity and depth of those interactions has had to be reduced in order to make group play work better. And I think it's a sacrifice the game should have made, and I'm glad that they did. But you'll see a lot of people who are arguing otherwise. People who know more about the system than I do. I could be wrong. The other thing, I'm not sure if I actually wanted to mention this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. Is Jeff fucking Bezos. So almost any review that you'll see from popular creators of this game is going to mention Jeff Bezos. He's a kind of a major meme right now. There's a major movement going on right now in Western culture where we're calling out the wealthiest members of our society for their behavior in a way that they are perhaps not accustomed to. And this effect is getting more and more pronounced. You can't talk about Amazon without talking about Bezos. Even though Bezos is like retired, he's no longer CEO. I mean, he will always have some connection there, obviously. But you can't talk about New World without talking about Bezos, it seems. I watched a first impressions video by Josh Strife Hayes. He calls it a review. I'm calling it a first impressions video. Do better, Josh. And throughout, he's dropping jokes about Jeff Bezos and referring to something that I heard Asmongold talk about. Or maybe it was the other way around. No, it was the other way around. Asmongold referenced Josh Strife Hayes on this. But Josh said, the game is good, but it's not good enough for Amazon. Because Amazon has all the money in the world. is associated with Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world. And because of that, money should buy the best MMO ever made. This is the main critique I'm hearing about this game, is that it has the word Amazon on the studio line, and it is not the best game ever made, definitively. This take is traveling remarkably well on the gamer scene, and I need to do my part to stop it. Not because I love Amazon, not because I love Jeff Bezos, but because when you repeat this idea, what you're doing is expressing discontent about something else in a place it doesn't belong. Because you see, when it comes to art, when it comes to creation, adding more money doesn't create a better product. You can't create twice as many dungeons by having twice as many developers making dungeons. You can't make twice as much art by having twice as many artists. You can't make the game twice as good by having twice as many developers. There's an upper level on human organization. And games are one of the most complicated things in the world to make. Not only because they require incredible levels of engineering and technical ability, but they require the collaborative efforts of hundreds of the world's most talented artists. I urge you, if you're criticizing New World for not being good enough for Jeff Bezos bucks, to ask yourself what other games you played you feel would have been improved by throwing more money at them. Would Minecraft have been better with more money? Probably not. Why is that? Well, a part of this is a phrase that I love to lean on. Restriction is the mother of creativity. When you can do anything, the most logical thing to do is to do nothing. People need restriction to create. And that's no exception for game studios. Lastly, if you feel that this game is not something that should be paid attention to or put time into because you have an ethical bone to pick with Amazon, that's fine. But please back it up. Please back it up. Don't use Jeff Bezos as a shorthand for an argument that you don't know how to make because you don't understand it and all you have are bad feelings. Try to do a little bit better. That was a lot more preachy than I expected. I apologize, y'all. I see y'all in the chat are tending to agree with me. Max, that's some real gamer logic. Rel, yikes. Kai, I think that was in relation to performance issues. No. Yeah. The thing I'm mainly riffing on is the Josh Strife video. A really popular MMO commentator. Kai, you and I were talking about him earlier, actually. And his argument after playing the game for like 2 or 3 hours was, it seems good, but it should be amazing. Josh's main issue was performance. I watched that video too, and I had the sense it was more of a broader critique. I could be misremembering, but I'm not just seeing that attitude from him. I'm seeing it elsewhere too. But to look at every single part of the game that seems to be unfinished and use the argument but Bezos seems to be a temptation I'm hearing I saw him give into. Maybe I should watch this video again to double check, Kai, and I appreciate y'all calling on me on it if I got it wrong. And it could be that I'm exaggerating from a vibe. Maybe I have my own negative feelings about those kinds of expressions. Tragic Minecraft's a great example of diminishing returns of more money. You remember the Notch vacation tracker back in 2010, 2011. Money doesn't buy creativity, max. Yeah. So yeah, that's, I guess, the best version of my argument is that you need money to make video games, but having money doesn't guarantee a better game. And just because the word Amazon is on it doesn't mean it needs to be the best game ever made in order to deserve some kind of attention or positive critical regard. It's a silly bar to hold. And it's not a bar that we hold other rich publishers to. But then again, maybe I'm missing something. Okay. So, hopefully that's enough on Bezos. Yeah, I'll watch that again, Kai, and I'll see if it confirms or contradicts what I said. If I'm very wrong, I'll add a comment to this video and elaborate on it a little bit. But I wanted to say a few words about Azoth. So I mentioned earlier what Azoth is. It's a currency. You get it for doing quests. You get it for killing mobs. You get it from seemingly almost everywhere. It's not gold. It's Azoth, the mystical juice of the continent, the green goop that makes everything work. And specifically, it makes a weaponry specs work. It makes fast travel work, and it makes crafting procs more efficient. And there's a cap on Azoth. You can only collect up to 1,000 Azoth at once. And once you go down to 0 Azoth, you can't change your weapon mastery, you can't fast travel, and you can't proc. You can't increase your proc chance for weapon perks on crafting or item perks on crafting. I've read that once you hit the end game, Azoth acquisition is sufficient to make it so that you don't have to worry about it in normal gameplay. You're not going to be running out. I hope this is true. But even if it is true, this Azoth currency is a cause for concern. This Azoth currency is one of the first things that's jumped out at me as a very obvious future opportunity for selling convenience. Now, one of the major controversies that New World endured during the lead up to this closed beta weekend is negative feedback from the world about its cash shop testing during the alpha, where they basically completely rolled back attempts to add convenience to the game, things like level boosts and experience boosters, things like that, due to loud and large negative feedback from the MMO community at large, especially folks like Asmongold. And I am on board with this critique. I think selling convenience in a game like this, it can never not trivialize time spent in the world. And I think MMOs need to be very careful about rewarding people differently for time spent in the world, and of creating a privileged class of some people whose time is intrinsically more valuable. I think that needs to be very careful there. And Azoth is a currency I 100% see Amazon selling to us in the future. Make so we can respec whenever we want, fast travel whenever we want, get high perk chances on all of our crafting attempts. And I hope I'm wrong about it. But as an MMO fan, this is one of the things that we need to care about. We need to think about what problems are being created by this presentation of New World that will be solved by a future microtransaction. And what will the effect of that microtransaction have on the world and the efforts of those who are engaging with it? Watch Azoth. I guarantee they are going to sell it to us. And I guarantee that if they tune it right, the community will not object. And it'll make them a bunch of money. That's the trick. I think that having gating of some kind on fast travel is good. I think having gating of some kind on weaponry specs might be good, although I kind of think maybe it's not. But I don't think that having those gates be different depending on how much you pay in from your wallet is anything but immoral. Kai, is this the main pay-to-win concern people have? Buying convenience in general, as a broader concern, Kai, I would say yes. So, Azoth, I haven't heard a lot of discussion about specifically, but people are worried about things like how about spending $50 to skip the level grind with your character? How about spending $15 to progress one gathering profession to max level? That's an enormous amount of convenience and skipped gameplay you're paying for. And they're likely to let the game release and ride out for a bit before they ply us with this. They've scaled back their cash shop implementation. They're just going to do cosmetics to start. But watch that space for the first convenience item. I have things to say about cosmetics too. I think that there's a problem with making the look of your game be based on what people are paying rather than what people are doing. But at least they've been upfront about that intent. But when it comes to convenience, I think that there have been some lies of omission told with the cash app implementation. And we will see those play out in the time to come. Which brings us to the future. Here's the first question. Will New World be delayed again? I don't think so. Honestly, I could see an argument for delaying it. Get in a more Apex coordinated PvE experience, like maybe a raid or a mega dungeon, something big and badass feeling. Maybe flesh out the system that has companies controlling and attacking territory to tipping territories over into war so that it's easier to participate in that. There's a whole bunch of things that they could flesh out still before they're released, but the truth is, I think this game's ready to go. And this is the thing about MMOs, is the game doesn't have to sell you on what it is today in order for you to engage with it. What it has to sell you on is what it's going to be tomorrow. Because that's the basic promise of an MMO. It's a world that you invest yourself in. And no one expects that world to look the same when they get to max level as it does when they start. That's the whole point, progression. And with the level of iteration we've seen in the last year, I feel optimistic that they can continue to iterate after launch. Now, post-launch development and pre-launch development are very different animals. I must be said. If we're talking about major system overhauls or implementations, getting those in after release is very hard to do. And we don't know what their post-launch strategy is going to be for content. Are they going to be doing expansions? Are they going to raise the player level? Are we going to have power creep with new content? Is new content going to have new story? We have no idea how a tournament is going to grow. It is a complete question mark. Are we going to get new continents? Are we going to go into new places? Or is it going to be something totally different? And I think that question is part of what makes the game exciting to play right now. Because there's enough that's different about this that it feels like we can ask those questions and not have a clear sense of the answer. Once Amazon Game Studios starts answering the questions of what post-launch development is going to look like and content, that's going to coalesce the potential of the game into the actuality. And that'll be a time where reviews of the game will be the most effective and most useful. So we'll just have to see. I really feel that if the PvE parts of this game gain any hold, there will be a strong temptation for Amazon to really fall off on iterating on the PvP stuff. Partly because PvP runs itself to some extent. Players are fighting players, and they make their own content. Once you have basic systems in place, there's an argument to be say, let players go nuts. But people always need new dungeons to play. But if you do that, if you let one side of the game atrophy and the other one thrive, you're going to be alienating a lot of people. And speaking for myself, the part of the game that I find the most interesting is this open PvP stuff. Right here, we're contesting a fort in the open world. I want to be doing this every day, ideally. I want these skirmishes. I want these 3v1s. I want these 1v3s. And I don't want to feel like the only way to play the game that makes sense that everyone is doing is the PvP flag off, gather, combat, craft, and dungeon. Because right now there's not enough here, and I just feel like PvP is at the heart of this and needs to stay there. At this point, I'm just kind of repeating myself, I feel. Is there any other question about the future of New World? Will it die like Crucible and Breakaway did? Well, Breakaway died before it ever got out, so I don't think... This is already got further than Breakaway ever did. Crucible, though, got released, and then unreleased, and then killed. Brutally, man. I never got to play Crucible, but what I heard from people about Crucible is that it never had a core game that people resonated with in the first place. And I think we're already seeing New World gain traction. We're already seeing the game successful in ways that Crucible never was. So I think it's won for itself at least a couple of years of live development. A lot of people look at things like Crucible and Breakaway dying from Amazon Game Studios, and what they see is something that's kind of heinous and evil. And that might be true, but there's another angle to look at it, which is Amazon is not afraid to kill their babies. And when it comes to being an effective creator, that's a really good quality to have. If you get overly attached to every single thing you make as a creator, you hold yourself back from doing your best work. In a way, I hope that New World is not a game that's here forever. I hope that they make New World the best game it can be for as long as it makes sense to make it. I don't want to see New World Shadowlands come out 15 years from today. I really don't. The game here has earned itself a life, I think. I think Amazon will see that. I think people will be playing it. I think there'll be tons of complaints like you have with every MMO. There will be die-offs as the potential coalesces into actuality. But there is something here, and I'll definitely be there playing it. Tragic Johnson, New World Classic, the old New World. God save me. Oh, it's such word salady. I love it though. Kai, how many players does it require per server to function properly? If hype drops off and server systems fall apart, or they scale well? Good question. So let's think. In order to engage in a war, you technically don't have to have a full 50-man roster. You can play with smaller groups. So let's think about like what the minimums are. I don't know. I think wars can be probably played with as few as like 3 to 5 people on a side. That'd be weird, but it's still enough time for one side to capture or defend all 4 points in 30 minutes. And technically, because you don't have to be in the company that declares war, all there has to be is enough wealth in the economy for someone to pay the war cost to initiate a war. And if that's there, then actually the thing scales down to a very tiny population, Kai. And you can have outfits, sorry, not outfits, I think in planet side. Companies can own multiple territories too. So at the end of the game, you can see two or three companies just in an eternal war against each other for all the territory. That's something that could totally happen in New World, based on my understanding of the systems. So I think it's fairly resistant to server die-off in that sense. Also, one of the things that we saw Amazon test during this closed beta is their process of merging servers. They deliberately tested the server merge to see how it worked because I think they're anticipating this very problem. Even though the game can run with the minimum of players, that doesn't mean it's going to create a good experience. So, like, what would be a good experience for everybody? I think what would be a good experience is if each time a game mode started that you filled up the number of players. So, like, if we assume that you need 100 players for a war, and let's say there is, on a given server with 20 territories, let's say there are, is 10 wars a week sound reasonable to y'all? What do you think, Will? I know you're here. Other factions can participate in the attack. That's accurate. So people from different factions can actually sign up on the war on the other faction's behalf. It's really surprisingly open. So 100 players times 10 wars a week, that's 1,000 players. But the thing is, you can have the same people participating in all these wars. But would that be fun? Would that be enjoyable? I think in order to make it enjoyable and fun, you need an equivalent number of people in each of the three factions to make it work. Kind of like PlanetSide, you know? So at least one company that can field 50 players in each faction. And if you say that, let's say one person in every 10 engages in the territory game. Like, let's just say. I think that sounds kind of reasonable, 10%. Unless they really beef it up and develop it. But again, I have this pessimistic take that the territory game is going to be one part of the game that grows very slowly. Not least which because it's just a very delicate thing. If you say 1 in 10 is a pessimistic estimate, then and you need 50 players from each company, and let's say each company needs a roster depth of at least 80 players in order to field 50. So that's 240 players, and those represent 10% of the population, so 2,400 players. Let's call it 2,500. That's a very bullshit guess. Probably 1 a day each weekday, maybe 2 on the weekends. Yeah, that's why I was thinking 10. So here's the big question for yours truly. Do I make a company for New World? What do you guys think? Should I make a company for this game? I'm completely conflicted, and I'll tell you why. Number one, yeah, of course I want to. Like, hell yeah. Deeg company. What could we call something really cool? Post gamers. We can call it streamer MMO, right? But without navel gazing too hard, I've gone back and forth a lot on the question of streaming games. And the reality of it is I can't do a lot of game streaming right now with the way I need to spend my time in order to be healthy mentally and physically. But I still like doing it. And maybe a game like New World is like my thing that I treat as a stream game. And maybe stuff like wars and capturing territory is what we do. But the thing is, guys, if I was going to do something like that, I would need help. A lot of help. I need some lieutenants. I need some consuls in my army. And you know, reality, again, using the word reality a lot, is I cannot attach myself to any game long term. Which is not good for me. And honestly, it's not good for y'all either. Consoles are concubines. Ooh, let's get a new rank in there for concubines for sure. I'm going to have to think on that one a little bit and maybe talk to some people. But I've gone all the way from, yes, I'm definitely going to do it, to no, I'm definitely not, all the way back to, I probably shouldn't, but also maybe I should. So at this point, who fucking knows? I got a month to figure it out. I think I said every single thing about New World at this point that I want to say. It is a brilliantly polished game in its production and presentation that is trying to combine the best of MMO, PvP, and PvE in a simple way with a novel combination to, and hopefully it turns out a kind of stew that people find is interesting. Maybe it'll become a recipe that others copy. The MMO scene is a small one, and it's not a growing. It's not really growing. Maybe there are qualities about this experience that can capture people in a way that main MMOs can't. One of the main critiques I've heard from MMO gamers about this is that the combat's too simple because there aren't enough abilities. But maybe that very nature is one of the things that makes it more accessible to most people. I think that might be true, but I'm not sure. Max Wild's bleeding player like nobody's business. The game should have a strong showing at the start. Player one. Yeah. As far as timing goes, this is pretty good. People are in the Final Fantasy waiting room, where the whole world is going to figure out that Final Fantasy is not as good as everyone says it is. I mean, not because it's not a great game. It is a great game, but people are acting like it's the best thing since sliced bread, and it ain't. No game is as good as the way Final Fantasy is getting coverage right now. No game is that good. Right place, right time. But this game is well positioned, and I expect to be playing it. I hope that they give me my Prox voice everywhere. I hope that the Sandbox, open world, PvP, territorial control stuff all remains a primary focus and doesn't fade into the background because of the inconvenience of human beings interacting with each other. And I'm excited to find out what the end game looks like. Final Fantasy re-released in 2010. People seem to forget that. Right. When did it relaunch? Didn't Final Fantasy relaunch in 2013? What even is a relaunch? Well, Final Fantasy did have a really relaunch. Like they really went back and refactored the game in a major way. Like the old game is not even available, I think. But anyway, this ain't a Final Fantasy discussion. For the YouTubers, for those of y'all who are watching this not live, I'm Deeg. This is recorded live on Twitch. Every Monday night, I'm here discussing something, usually gaming related. Last week, we covered Guild Wars 2's first look at their upcoming expansion. This week, we're covering New World and its prospects. Next week, who knows what we're going to talk about. One of the stories I've been tracking with is the Activision Blizzard lawsuit about sexual harassment and discrimination. It's a tragic situation unfolding out over the last 2 decades where accountability is finally appearing in the equation. I'm slow to draw conclusions, but it's something we must discuss. Might be next week, might be later. Let's see. I'm Deeg, and I'm definitely here to talk it out. If you're on YouTube, find me on Twitch. If you're on Twitch, find me on YouTube. I have a Twitter. I share random thoughts all the damn time. Deeg Thoughts. And of course, if you want to peek behind the scenes, I have a Patreon, which you're welcome to support me on for a token amount. Just come say hey. Discord is always available, and it's the place where you're most reliably going to be able to see me and get me. So by all means, hit me up there, all the places. I am exhausted. This discussion was longer and deeper than I thought it would be, and that's what she said. New conglomerate number 1, tragic. No, why? You know, funnily enough, tragic. I think that we've mapped the planet-side factions to New World factions. So, New Conglomerate are the Marauders of New World. They're simple, easy to understand, and attractive to new players. The Vanu are definitely the Syndicate because they're both purple and because it tends to attract the sweaty tryhards. And that just leaves the TR, the people who are on the side, just kind of role play it up. Definitely the Covenant, the Holy Warriors of Eternum. So, if you're a PlanetSide player looking at this game, give me your take on that. I'm curious what you think. And that'll do it for me tonight. Thanks, y'all. This has been fun. I am Deeg. I'm getting the hell out of here. I love y'all, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.